What will wake the dead? Well, I don't know, but we're going to find out because this week we're talking about the curse of the mummy's tomb. So grab your books, everybody, and let's get goosebumps. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Let's Get Goosebumps, the series where I, Ryno, am trying to read, along with all of you out there, every one of the original 62 R.L. Stine Goosebump books in celebration of the 30th anniversary of this belovedly spooky franchise that many of us grew up reading. Some of us reading along today have never read them before, and that's really cool. I'm really enjoying that. So please tell me about your Goosebump journey in the comments section, emails, wherever you want to chat about it. I will always chat about Goosebumps with you. So, like I said, this week we are on to the fifth book in the franchise. You can see mine was clearly a library book because it's wrapped in that, like, I don't remember like if they did this in your libraries, but they have that like clear, like, I don't know. It's like, I want to call it like a giant masking tape they put over the entire book. And I also saw a print on the inside of this that said property of Carver Public Library. So I'll just assume I purchased this from the library. If not, I owe you $3, Carver Public Library, $2.95 to be exact. Anyway, so this book, The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb, I did not remember reading. I mean, I remembered reading it, but I didn't remember anything about the story other than mummies. This was originally published in November of 1992. It is 132 pages long. Of course, the cover art is done by Tim Jacobus again, because he did pretty much all the Goosebumps art with the exception of, I forget what I said originally. It was like 2 or 3 of them or something like that. But the cover tagline is "What will wake the dead?" And you've got yourself a mummy all wrapped up with some glowing red eyes right on the front here. There is no episode of the TV show to pair along with this, so if you didn't read the book, there's no way to really, other than reading like a Goosebumps wiki or something like that, to get the summary. Or I guess that's why you're here at this podcast. I don't know why I'm being weird today, but anyway. So let me read the back of the book here. Something dead has been here. Gabe just got lost in a pyramid. One minute, his crazy cousin Sari was right ahead of him in the pyramid tunnel. The next minute, she's disappeared. But Gabe isn't alone. Someone else is in the pyramid, too. Someone or something. Gabe doesn't believe in the curse of the mummy's tomb, but that doesn't mean that the curse isn't real, does it? Reader beware, you're in for a scare. So yeah, I guess let me just dive right in because I don't want to ruin any plot points here because I found there's some interesting structure within this book here. But we're back to the first person narrative, and our main character is Gabe, who is half Egyptian. Gabe is spending his Christmas vacation in Egypt because his parents have business there. They're important business people. I just need to say right away here, actually, before we dive too far in, that this one felt really different than the ones that had been written before. I think because it's like it was in the first person. I feel like Gabe, who is the narrator, is speaking to us almost in a past tense, like he's telling us the story. And so there's a couple of moments where it's kind of like teases of like what's to come. Like here at the end of, I don't know if this is chapter 1, but it's on page 7. He says, "Little did I know that in a few days, Mom and Dad would be gone, and I would be deep inside the pyramid we were staring at. Not just inside it, but trapped inside of it, sealed inside of it. Probably forever." So they do a couple of those teases. I feel like they also do that in the next book in Let's Get Invisible. I don't feel like they're needed, but I get it, I guess, because you're like, you got to keep the attention of the kids that are reading it. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there. Well, also that this is our first international story. We are in Egypt for this one, so that's fun. And there's a lot more humor in this one too. So like Gabe is a very jokey main character here. So while staying in their hotel in Al Jaza, Gabe's parents receive an emergency phone call and have to rush to Alexandria. And no, not the town from The Walking Dead. They say they have to go be on a plane that leaves in an hour. And I'm like, yeah, sure, parents. Likely story. You're definitely spies. I mean, in what world are they making it to the airport to get on a plane that leaves in 1 hour? I mean, I know this is pre 9/11 and everything like that, but still. Come on. Rather than going with his parents, Gabe is given the option to stay with his uncle Ben, who is a scientist investigating pyramids in Cairo. Um, as far as I'm concerned, having an Uncle Ben seems like it could go south pretty quick. Spider-Man taught me just never to really kind of rely on Uncle Ben's because you never know how long they're going to be around. But Gabe's parents call Uncle Ben, and then they just leave Gabe in the hotel room. Well, Gabe waits for his uncle. He's this is the first time we're introduced to his good luck charm, which is what he calls the summoner, and it's a mummy's hand that he bought a few years ago at a garage sale. Gross. I feel like when I was a kid and they talked about this, I was like, oh yeah, one of those things. But in reality, I'm like, ew, like, what? Nasty. So Uncle Ben and his daughter, which is Gabe's cousin Sari, arrive. Gabe has drama with Sari, of course. Even though she's only just a few months older than him, she always treats him like a child. So the next day, Ben takes the kids. They go to the pyramid, and while preparing to enter the pyramid, Ben warns the kids that his team may have unleashed an ancient curse by exploring the pyramid. He says it so casually and just like, yeah, maybe it's a curse. I'm gonna read it here on page 25. Uncle Ben handed us both flashlights. Clip them onto your jeans as we go in, he instructed. He gazed at me. You don't believe in curses, do you? You know, the ancient Egyptian kind? I didn't know how to reply, so I shook my head. Good, Uncle Ben replied, grinning. Because one of my workers claims we violated an ancient decree by entering this new tunnel and that we've activated some curse. We're not scared, Sari said, giving him a playful shove toward the entrance. Get going, Dad. And seconds later, we were stepping into the small square opening cut into the stone. Stooping low, I followed them through a narrow tunnel that seemed to slope gradually down. I just think it's so crazy that it's just like, here I am, ignorant to curses, you know, kind of setting the stage here. But anyway, like I said, they head into the pyramid. They make their way through a tight corridor that opens into this larger room. And I don't know if I have developed claustrophobia in my older years or something here, but there it is. I don't anything about these like tunnels that they could get lost in and everything like that. It is it freaks me out. All right, it stresses me out to no end. So they go into this big room where Uncle Ben's team is, including this one guy named Ahmed. He's going to come up later. While Ben is distracted, Sari suggests to Gabe that they go exploring on their own because children are awful and cannot be trusted. Gabe is reluctant, but Sari insists, confidently saying that they won't get lost. Gabe follows Sari into the tunnels, but Sari quickly vanishes from view. And there's actually an interesting part here that I feel like because we are in the first person, like structurally, we can jump in and out of time and learn about the character in different ways. I mean, I could be wrong here, but so Gabe tells this story about Siri that's actually on the bottom of page 37. While he's lost, he says, I suddenly remembered another time a few years before. Sari and Uncle Ben had come to my house for a visit. I think Sari and I were 7 or 8. We went outside to play. It was a gray day, threatening rain. Sari had a jump rope and was showing off, as usual, showing me how good she was at it. Then, of course, when she let me try it, I tripped and fell, and she laughed like crazy. I decided to get back at her by taking her to this deserted old house a couple blocks up the street. I hope there's not a haunted camera in the basement of that house. The kids in the neighborhood all believed the house was haunted. It was a neat place to sneak in and explore, although our parents were always warning us to stay away from it because it was falling apart and dangerous. So I led Sari to this house and told her it was haunted, and we sneaked in through the broken basement window. It got even darker outside and started to rain. It was perfect. I could tell Sari was really scared to be alone in that creepy old house. I, of course, wasn't scared at all because I'd been there before. Well, we started exploring with me leading the way, and somehow we got separated, and it started thundering and lightning outside. There was rain pouring in through the broken windows. I decided maybe we should get home. So I called to Sari, no answer. I called again, still no answer. Then I heard a loud crash. Calling her name, I started running from room to room. I was scared to death. I was sure something terrible had happened. I ran through every room in the house, getting more and more scared. I couldn't find her. I shouted and shouted, but she didn't answer. I was so scared I started to cry. Then I totally panicked and I ran out of the house and into the pouring rain. I ran through the thunder and lightning, crying all the way home. By the time I got home, I was soaked through and through. I ran into the kitchen, sobbing and crying that I'd lost Sari in the haunted house. And there she was, sitting at the kitchen table, comfortable and dry, eating a big slice of chocolate cake, a smug smile on her face. And now peering into the darkness of this pyramid, I knew Sari was doing the same thing to me, trying to scare me. So, again, uh, Gabe, convinced that he's being pranked, he keeps walking and ends up in this small room where Sari, of course, does scare him, and she laughs. And then Uncle Ben shows up, and he's like, "What are you guys doing?" And then he sees what happens, and he laughs, and so Gabe is not happy about all the laughing. Gabe is not happy. So the next morning during breakfast, Ben gets a phone call, and apparently almost all of them, all of Ben's workers have become ill. So he's got to go. He's got to go check up on them. So he's going to leave the kids in the hotel room. He tells them to stay there, order some room service. But of course, these kids, they're awful. They don't do that. Gabe decides that they're going to go to a nearby museum all by themselves. I mean, it's 1992. There's no GPS. There's no cell phones. What could possibly go wrong? You're in a city that you're not familiar with. Why not? Just take a stroll. Nothing bad will happen. But anyway, they find this museum, which isn't that far from the hotel. They go in, they wander around, they find a display with a mummy in it, and they talk about the mummification project, which I remember being like 12 years old in like sixth grade and doing these projects on mummy. And it's kind of crazy how we learned about all this back then, but one of my favorite projects is I wrapped up a teddy bear in like tissue paper and made a sarcophagus for him out of like a shoebox. And what a time to be alive it was. That was a good year, sixth grade. I'm going to read a little bit about this because I feel like it's pretty great and morbid on page 54 toward the bottom. They did a great job wrapping. Excuse me, let me start over. They did a great wrapping job, I said, examining the carefully wrapped fingers on the hands which were crossed over the mummy's chest. I was a mummy the Halloween before last, and my costume completely unraveled after 10 minutes. Sari tisk tisk. Do you know how they made mummies? I asked, moving around to view it from the other side. Do you know the first thing they did? They removed the brain. Yuck, stop, she said, sticking out her tongue and making a disgruntled face, or disgusted face. Don't you know about this? I asked, delighted that I had some truly gruesome information that she didn't. Please, enough, she said, holding up one hand as if to fend me off. No, this is interesting, I insisted. The brain had to come out first. They had this special tool. It was like a long, skinny hook. They'd push it up the corpse's nose until it reached the brain and then wiggled it back and forth until the brain became mush. Stop, Sari pleaded, covering her ears. Then they took a long spoon, I continued gleefully, and scooped the brain out a little at a time. I made a scooping motion with my hand. Scoop, scoop. They scooped the brain out through the nose. Or sometimes they popped off an eyeball and scooped the brain out through the eyeball socket. Gabe, I mean it, Sari cried. She really looked like she was about to hurl. She was green. I loved it. I never knew that Sari had a squeamish bone in her body, but I was really making her sick. Outstanding, I thought. I would definitely have to remember this technique. It's all true, I told her, unable to hold back a wide grin. Just shut up, she muttered. Of course, sometimes they didn't pull the brain out the nose. Sometimes they just sliced off the head. Then they drained the brains out through the neck and put the head back on the body. They just bandaged and back on, I guess. Gabe, I'd been staring at her the whole time, checking out her reaction. She was looking sicker and sicker. She was breathing real heavy. Her chest was sort of heaving. I really thought she was going to lose her breakfast. If she did, I'd never let her forget it. That's really gross, she said. Her voice sounded funny, like it was coming from underwater or something. But it's true, I said. Didn't your dad ever tell you about how they made mummies? She shook her head. He knows I don't like... And you know what they did with the guts? I asked, enjoying the startled look on her face. They put them in jars, and I suddenly realized that Sari's startled look wasn't for me. She was actually staring over my shoulder. Huh. I turned around and saw why she was suddenly looked so surprised. A man had entered the room and was standing just in front of the first display case. It took me a few seconds to recognize him. It was Ahmed, the strange, silent Egyptian with the black ponytail who had greeted us in such an unfriendly manner down inside the pyramid. He was dressed the same in loose-fitting white trousers and a shirt with a scarlet bandana around his neck, and his expression was just as unfriendly, angry even. So we have Ahmed here at the museum. He says that Uncle Ben told him to take them back to their hotel room. This is the classic white van child abduction scenario here, and it's honestly sort of terrifying in this book. Like, hey, I'm a friend of your uncle. He told me to come get you. Come hop in my car. It'll be fine. Ahmed takes the kids to his car, but as he starts driving in the opposite direction of the hotel, Gabe, who's got a great sense of direction, realizes that they're being kidnapped. He tells Sari, we got to make a break for it. They jump out of the car. They run away, which, again, it's not just the abduction that's kind of scary. It's also now that they're like on the run. They're kind of lost in a city where they don't speak the language. And again, it's 1992. They don't know where they're going. So it's kind of it's just the entire thing is kind of scary, and I don't know. It really creeped me out, but I feel like it was it serves the story. So, but luckily for these kids, that like I said, they're on the loose, lost in New York. Excuse me, lost in Egypt, but. Lucky for them, they sort of unintentionally end up back at the hotel area. They find this out because they kind of ask a cab driver for help, who just laughs maniacally at them and then points out the window, and they're like literally right in front of the hotel. So they make it back into the hotel, where they get in their room and stay there until Uncle Ben arrives. When he does, he tells the kids tell him what happened, and Ben says that he's got to go back to the pyramid to continue his exploration because, who cares? Who cares about the kids? So, but for safety, he does take Gabe and Sari with him to the chamber. And don't worry, this time, not just flashlights, they also get beepers to alert each other if something happens or they get lost. And naturally, Gabe does get lost because he stops to tie his shoe, and no one is paying attention in this book ever. So he tries to find them, and all of a sudden, while he's looking, the floor just kind of like caves in underneath of him, and he falls through, landing in this like big room filled with mummification tools everywhere, with like gauze and all that sort of stuff. And I just want to read this part here that is in the page of the middle of page 87. I realized that I had made an incredible discovery here. By falling through the floor, I had found a hidden chamber, a chamber where mummies had been made. I found all of the tools and all of the materials used to make mummies 4,000 years ago. Once again, the sour smell invaded my nose. I held my breath to keep myself from gagging. It was the smell of 4,000-year-old bodies, I realized, a smell that had been bottled up in this ancient hidden chamber until now. Staring at the twisted, shadowy figures gazing back at me in faceless horror, I reached for the beeper. Uncle Ben, you must come quickly, I thought. I don't want to be alone down here any longer. You must come here now. I pulled the beeper off of my belt and brought it up close to the light. All I had to do, I realized, was push this button, and Uncle Ben and Sari would come running. Gripping the small square tightly in my hand, I moved my hand to the button and cried out in alarm. The beeper was ruined, wrecked, smashed. The button wouldn't even push. I must have landed on it when I fell. It was useless. I was all alone down here. Alone with the ancient mummies staring facelessly, silently back at me through the deep, dark shadows. At this point, hold on. I feel like I just lost myself in my notes. I apologize. It's at this point in the story I wrote, when Gabe finds out that the beeper isn't working, this is the part where I probably would have just passed out from a panic attack in sheer fear and just died right there. So they would have just found my body with like old beeper in hand and stuff. But and to top it all off, on top of that, the ground is littered with scorpions. So lucky for Gabe, though, Sari shows up. She's also gotten a little lost. And this is actually the part during the book where I was like, maybe something's up with Sari. I don't trust her anymore. But she's fine. So I'm also realizing while I'm sitting here reading this book at this point in time, I'm 94 pages into the story, and there hasn't been a single Walking Dead thing as of yet. And I kind of love that. I love that this like cover and the tagline gives you the impression that the story is going to be. And then it sort of becomes this other creepy thing entirely. It's just like the right amount of misdirection, and it plays with those expectations. So anyway, Sari still has her pager. Sari, she's not my cell phone. Sari still has her pager, and they use it to try and call Uncle Ben. They see a light coming through the tunnel, and the kid hope that it's Ben, but obviously it's a Goosebumps book. It's not Ben. It's Ahmed who's carrying this torch. Ahmed says that he's warned Ben about, both literally and figuratively, nailed it. Ahmed says that he's warned Ben about a curse, but Ben didn't believe him. He then says that the kids violated the sacred chamber of an ancient Egyptian princess named Kala, and because of that, they should die. He's basically a serial killer because he mummified all the mummies that are in this chamber that they've fallen into. He grabs his knife at this point and goes after the kids. This is when Ben finally shows up, tries to stop him, but he gets a torch to the head by Ahmed, and Ahmed then heaves the torch across the room, and it falls into the tar pit where the tar starts like bubbling and boiling. And the kids watch helplessly as Ahmed closes Ben's body into a sarcophagus, and then makes the kids get into a sarcophagus as well, into a separate one. I have to tell you, the trauma of lowering oneself into their own coffin is absolutely terrifying. I'm going to read that part right here on page 115, or excuse me, 114. I hesitated, resting my hand on the rotting wood on the side of the case. I glanced at the case next to it, the case with Uncle Ben inside. It was carved of stone, and the heavy stone lid was closed, sealing it up tight. Did Uncle Ben have any air in there? I wondered, gripped with fear. Was he able to breathe? And then I thought glumly, what difference does it make? All three of us are going to be dead soon. All three of us are going to be mummies locked away in this hidden chamber forever. Get in now, Ahmed ordered, his dark eyes burning into mine. I'm just a kid, I cried. I don't know where the words came from. I was so scared. I really didn't know what I was saying. An unpleasant sneer formed on Ahmed's face. Many of the pharaohs were your age at death, he said. I wanted to keep him talking. I had the desperate idea that if I could keep the conversation going, I could get us out of this mess. But I couldn't think of anything to say. My brain just froze. Get in, Ahmed ordered, moving toward me menacingly. Feeling totally defeated, I slid one leg over the side of the rotting coffin, raised myself up, and then dropped down beside Siri. She had her head bowed and her eyes shut tight. I think she was praying. She didn't glance up, even when I touched her shoulder. The coffin lid began to slide over us. The last thing I saw were the red flames leaping up over the pit of tar. Then the lid closed us into complete blackness. This is a nightmare. This is also the part in the book where I got like a little bit confused about like where everything was and sort of like the physical layout of things. So there's like these little escape hatches that are built into the coffins, I guess, that allowed souls of the deceased to escape. So the three of them are able to kind of get into one coffin together. I'm assuming these are like massive coffins. And this is while Ahmed is distracted. So they like three of them get out and obviously they get caught again, and Ahmed forces them at dagger to pretty much they're going to walk up and have to jump into this tar pit. So terrified, Gabe pulls out that lucky charm of his, which remember, the mummy hand. And Ahmed sees this and he recognizes it as the hand of the priestess. So this is the point when all of a sudden all the mummies in the room come alive and begin surrounding Ahmed. Some of the mummies grab Ahmed. They try to throw him into the pit. Gabe looks away, but when he looks back, everything is back to normal, and Ahmed is like screaming and running out of the room. So kind of crazy. It's literally only like a page and a half of this like supernatural moment here. But relieved, Ben and the children go back to their hotel room. Gabe pulls out the mummy's hand and pretends he's summoning ancient spirits. There's a knock on the door, and it's the parents. I actually really feel like it should have just ended with the knock on the door right there. But anyway, so my overall thoughts here is I did check because I felt like it was really setting itself up for a sequel, and there is one called Return of the Mummy. So I am excited for that when we get to it. But what I really liked about this one is that it actually wasn't supernatural until those last like 2 pages at the very end there. And also it was in the way where it was like, was it fear? It was in the dream-like sense where they could just like play it off and be like, I don't know what you're talking about. The way people do when they're in denial and have suffered from trauma. So, this book, though, definitely had a distinctly different feel from the other ones that we read so far. It had a lot more of that humor that I think is going to be incorporated into the book sort of moving forward. But I thought it was good. I enjoyed it. I liked that it was kind of the typical Goosebumps story, but in the not so typical surrounding. Like the fish out of water story was like, magnified because it didn't take place in familiar surroundings and stuff. So I also thought it was cool how like I said, how you thought it was going to be this whole thing where it was like the mummy terrorizing kids. And then that's not really what it all was at all. It was essentially like a serial killer, child abduction, like lost, getting lost and claustrophobia and stuff like that. And that's the thing. It's like, it plays with those expectations. So that's it. I read this one really fast, honestly. I hope to never myself come face to face with a living mummy. That seems like a nightmare. I don't really have a ton more to say about it. I'm actually surprised this one didn't get made into a TV show, even though I feel like I distinctly remember a mummy in the opening credits. Oh, actually, you know what? I lied. They did the thing they did with the Night of Living Dummy, and there is a sequel episode. So Return of the Mummy, there's an episode of the show. And it's an early episode of the show, but there just isn't one for this one. So that's interesting. So I'm excited for when we get to that. I think that one's a little later down the road here. But next up on our reading list is Let's Get Invisible. I don't know if you remember this one. Mirror with a switch makes people go invisible. I'm excited to talk about that one because both that I have a lot to say about that book and the TV show as well is kind of insane. So definitely watch the episode of that show as well. But thank you everyone for reading along, following along, watching. If you are watching, please feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Like I said, I'm going to try and release these as consistently as I can, but it's like gonna kind of be like here and there and everything like that. And I hope that you're reading along too, because it's a lot of fun. A lot of fun doing this. If you are listening, rate and review. And of course, if you want to get in touch at all, you can send me an email at letsgetgoosebumps@gmail.com. That is just the name of the series at Gmail. So, and of course, if you want to get in touch with me on social media, all my social media is Ryno, RYNO 1185 on there. So, and I would always love to talk Goosebumps and everything like that. So I hope that everybody is doing well and looking forward to this, continuing this journey and this series with me. We're gonna do this. We are gonna do this. We are 5 down, and what is that? 57 to go. 62 books. Yeah, for like 57 to go. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. So so take care, everybody, and stay creepy.